Okay, welcome back this afternoon, to the afternoon edition of Live with the House Human Services Committee. Um, we are picking up our, continued work on H91, and we're going to look at feedback from individuals, and we are going, and organizations, and we are going to take up End Homelessness Vermont. Bear with us because there's a number of those. First one I'm going to start with, I'm doing the exact opposite of what I was going to do, but the first one I'm going to start with is the one that says EHVT combined memo number 2.
Which some people still have as 3 separate. Is that the thing we're talking about? I think.
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, yes, that's the same one that is 3 separate ones. For people, Lori gave us a blue copy, but you got an earlier copy that doesn't have blue on it, but. Okay, so we're gonna move from the most recent and then move backwards on this. Okay. So, in reading over these comments, the particular comment, is something that I was, the first one around the sort of, is the first round around statewide planning and allocation of resources. I was sharing with Jubilee earlier a process that has been used for years at Dale, that does involve the allocation of resources and involves a group of different people, but making allocation. When I was there, it was decisions, and now they're recommendations to the department, and then the department issues the same thing. It being a collaborative effort, in terms of looking at planning, and I think I think in our planning piece that we have in here, we already talk about that being a collaborative effort. But one of the things I think that we need to pick up on is what Jubilee was talking about earlier, and maybe we need a specific reference to the COC inclusion, or I used the wrong in natural.
No, COCs,
Yes.
multiple, we have 2.
Yes.
Right.
The planning process that's used there. So,
Because they do, the way the federal applications, it's called, and Abby Miller, they talked about this a bit. It's the collaborative application. So they look at the needs, and then their application to HUD, there's several grants, and they do a local process that feeds into the state process. And then within CCHA, it's, Chittenden County, but
okay.
that
Yeah.
then ranks and prioritize, and then they submit that, application. It's it goes to the feds, but,
So if we can, look at page 10 of the draft, of draft number 3.1, we see VHARP, and we see the sort of construct that we came up with, the duties of the community action agencies, and then VHARP duties of the department. And so, one of the things that we, talked about was the planning. Where is that in here, Katie? Do we have that?
The needs assessment, page 11, is that what you're thinking? Page 12?
Yeah. And so I'm thinking that we add to in the shall utilize the information, or however you want to, I'm not sure how to say the words, but to utilize the information and process of the COCs. In other words, they don't need to go out and do something that's all brand new, because the COCs already have to do this process.
Okay.
So I want that, so
Oh, you want this in the lead-in language, like integrate it as part of that first sentence or first paragraph.
To 11A.
well, it could be there. I was just thinking of the plan shall, but it could be there that it shall jointly develop a regional needs assessment that's inclusive of the, can you, I don't know what the phraseology should be, Jubilee.
Um,
We don't need to wordsmith it right now.
yeah,
What we're talking about is the concept of utilizing an existing, homelessness planning.
By the
That
community.
is,
The local-
it's done by the community continuum of care.
possibly mentioning like each region's local housing coalitions. And that I can reach out to the, to Frank and the chairs of each COC, for feedback on actual language.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna start giving deadlines on these things. Just for the people doing things, so, that, we would need that on Monday.
Monday, okay.
Okay. Okay, that addresses that. Um. I don't believe that we have this structured so that case management is only for people who meet certain eligibility, so I don't think that's,
No, we changed that.
That's not
Yeah,
an
that
accurate-
was, right.
yeah. And I don't really think in terms of use of hotels, I will look at the previous memo, but, whatever the contractual agreement that is reached between a community action agency or some other, shelter provider. Or, because it doesn't have to be a community action agency, shelter providers can do the same thing. I mean, I think that's gonna be up to the contractual agreement between the two parties. We had this in state language because it was the state entering into those agreements, and so we were telling the state what to do, but, I'm at the top of the third page now. 2210.
I'm sorry,
This is,
Number two.
yeah, this is one that says number 2,
Right.
but it's the last thing on here, one that says number 2.
I'm sorry, I wasn't clear on the direction you were suggesting.
I would not put that in statute.
Okay,
Right now, we have in the bill requirement that they have to meet public accommodation standards. And I mean, I think that's appropriate, that the use of hotels, can only be those who meet public accommodation standards. They can have honestly, they can have any sort of contractual agreement that addresses, the needs of the people who are staying there or whatever. I mean, that's, I don't see a need to put it in the statute.
Right,
What I'm saying.
I think it's a good recommendation, but that's the caps should be,
Should be
that's what
thinking
they,
about, right.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's their, they can
Yeah,
create rules.
I think it's valid. I don't
Yeah,
just don't think it's valid for the law.
Right.
Anybody strongly disagree with that? Okay. Okay, now we're moving on to one that if you're looking at the,
I'm just wondering, can we like work that in somehow in intent or, I just think it's an important thing to recognize, but,
have a gut reaction to the same. I don't know if there's some encouragement or for the purpose of providing stability, it's encouraged that,
This is part of the reason of, really this transformation process, because we've honestly, state government has not been willing to contract with hotels. They've just been, doing the voucher thing. And, at one point in time, two budgets ago, I guess now, it was a big push and they were going to contract, and it was when we implemented the $80 $80 per day limit, and everybody was afraid that the bottom was going to fall out and nobody was going to have a place to stay, and that didn't happen. But neither did it happen that BGS contracted with hotels either. So that didn't happen either. And one of the reasons why, one of the sort of myriad of reasons why I think this is better to happen at the local level is because those things are more likely to happen when you have a direct relationship and you're not dealing with a state bureaucracy, frankly.
Yeah, what I just meant
Yeah.
is referring to that somehow in the planning part or something, just highlighting it as something.
For consideration in
Yeah.
the
Just recognizing.
transition plan. Okay, now we're on to, if you're looking at the combined one, it says H91 draft number 1.2. Kind of in the middle of the third page of that document, or if you're looking at three separate documents, it says draft number 1.2. 313-205, 2025. So this is, and thank you that, Brenda had said that she would provide the link to the short form that she used, and we have that electronically.
Oh,
But the link is right
okay,
there.
And that's what you were asking
Yes,
about earlier.
yes, right. That idea of that
Very
very front
brief
door,
setup.
be able to
Yeah.
triage as number 3,
Yes.
immediate stability because of the degree of
Yes,
the situation.
so thank you for providing that, Brenda, appreciate that. And so that's one of the things that we are wanting to encourage is that brief, quick assessment.
And and in my mind, that kind of is part of the discussion about, one could say, well, that would be where you would assess eligibility, but if you want to try to move more towards individualized by the experts, making those judgments about needing immediate stability for a day or two to sort out further recommendations versus, just given the capacity limits, can't do anything more right now other than maybe refer to a cold weather shelter if that's what exists and so forth, that really would tie into that. That's what they would be using at that.
All right. Transitional, oh, wait, that's, no, that's from ability to port hotel vouchers. I don't know what that means, but.
I read it twice and figured it out. It's like, that's assuming kind of a voucher system remaining in effect, and that if you have been approved for a voucher, but you're able to move quickly into a rental, that resource should be flexible enough to, if you don't have a Section 8.
Oh, yeah, I mean, that's the whole intent of
The
the flexibility,
of the
yeah.
fund,
I
yeah.
mean, so the concept is a good concept. I don't think it's something that we put in statute, but that's if we haven't stressed enough in the bill about flexibility, and so maybe that's, one of the things to make sure that, Katie, in the, transition process that we want to encourage maximum flexibility of use of resources and I would love to be able to, I don't know exactly know how to say it, but to make this process much more simple. Like, I don't think it needs to be as complicated as
Streamline.
streamlined. That's the word I was looking for, more streamlined eligibility or application process, more, to concentrate on streamlined eligibility and application and to keep an eye out essentially for creating flexibility, enabling flexibility.
That sounds like legislative intent. Is it okay if I put it there or you want it somewhere else?
No. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I would like it that in the, well, I mean, if you want to put, it's the intent in the planning section. If you want to have a little intent sub thing in the planning section, then we probably might add a thing or two as we go, a thing or two to it as we go along.
Part of the implementation.
Mhm.
Can you also add the word human-centered? Since we're,
Well, I think we should have just a statement in there that takes into consideration the complex lives of individuals that need support. So, yeah, I understand what you're saying, yeah. Well, we'll figure out where
We
to
can-
make sure
yeah.
that we emphasize on that. Okay, I'm at 2205 where it says transitional shelter. Previous two memos, okay, it's just,
Mhm.
it's commenting on our discussion essentially.
And that, yeah, it's really goes together with that eligibility conversation.
Yeah.
Under 207.
Mhm.
I mean, we left that as a kind of unfinished discussion. I continue to strongly support that approach over the use of the eligibility.
The prioritization.
Prioritization, yeah.
Yeah. So discussion of case management, we've already clarified and we'll make sure that it's that way, but that I'm pretty sure
Yes.
that it is.
Yes, we,
Yeah,
yeah,
we've already
we got
dealt
a
with
check
that.
mark there, right?
Yeah. Okay, eligibility. Take actions shall provide or cause to be provided temporary emergency housing and transition housing pursuant.
This might be more when we go back to the draft 3.1, the way we have it structured now to kind of footnote, this is the core decision point about keeping legislative priorities versus flexibility for providers to identify based on capacity and resources, who is critical to.
I was, sometimes when you read things and then reread them and they just then all blend together, and that's what was happening for me. I was trying to understand the difference between, I understand the prioritize and, it's moved from RRO to CAP, but, shall prioritize or cause to be prioritized. I think that's less strong than saying
Yeah,
provided.
provided.
Yeah,
Which we're, I'm lost.
go ahead, Brenda.
Yeah, okay, that's because, I'm sorry, just to make that clear where you were, that's because I was trying to figure out a way to, work in that this eligibility is only a priority. Because this is under eligibility instead of, that you shall cause to the, like, members who have. So I just was trying to figure out where to put in, like, so that it could be changed from eligibility to priority. If that maybe I'm not explaining that well, but, So right now, the sentence says that you shall do this for these people, and this was, to meet eligibility. And so this was just to change eligibility priority, so there's probably a better way to do that.
You were, let me see if I can, summarize.
Thank you.
You were, is your statement that you would prefer to see prioritization over eligibility?
Right, and then I was just like looking at language.
Okay.
We had already.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, we're good.
Right.
Okay, we haven't made a
Well, we
decision
haven't-
about
no,
that?
Discussed it at length, yes.
But that's
Yeah.
kind of, yeah, we discussed it, but that's then the last paragraph wouldn't use priority at all. That's the next, which is what I was saying, that's my preferred approach, but that's, yeah, that's part of that decision point. Yeah, it's a bigger discussion.
Yeah, I don't know what universe y'all are in, but we can't remove eligibility and priorities.
Why not?
How are you going to determine who is served?
That, well, this is suggesting that it would be the providers.
I worry about inconsistency
Yeah, that would
in
be.
the application of it with,
Some level.
Somebody asked me who I'm serving. Well, I mean, if we're just saying we're just serving homeless people, I'm not
Yeah,
opposed to
that's too
that, but
much.
I'm just
No,
saying.
you're right. You're
I'm
right.
just saying that is gonna lead to
Yeah,
inconsistencies.
yeah. All right, I'll back off.
It's a nice global thought.
Yeah.
I like the idea of removing eligibility and having standard prioritization across the state for each cap agency.
Right, and that, yeah. I think that's.
Okay,
Way to go.
now we're on to the last of the three memos. I don't know if Brenda sleeps or not, but yeah. Okay. Yeah, and this is about advocating for your organization.
Well,
It might not be
It's,
that. It could be another.
it's not, because I mean, the thing is that, okay. Very briefly, Brenda Siegel for record, which I didn't say before. It's really about the fact that this doesn't exist right now, except that we do it. And it's very challenging.
So you're advocating for an ombudsman role for for people who are homeless.
Right, and currently,
homeless
there's
need.
no way for us to, like, we are doing it. It has to be independently funded,
Mhm.
and so that part of our funding has to come from somewhere else, because we can't be.
Okay, I understand the concept. You're asking us to consider an ombudsman role.
Because theoretically, if it was created, you could apply to be the ombudsman, some other group could apply and say, we.
Okay, we'll take that into consideration. All right. That's 1, 2, and 3. Now we're on to In Homelessness Vermont. This is the longer one. It says draft number 1.2 at the top.
It starts with the appeals process.
Yeah.
Additional recommendations.
Yes. I have the same one. Are we all looking at the same one? Are those your pennies? Are you playing basketball or something?
what's that?
I said, but they kind of look like pennies, when people, put on different colors to play basketball.
Oh, it's been shipped over to me at Connor. It's, yeah, there's Irish flag that was flown over the Irish Parliament.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, so nice. So you're Irish?
Peruvian.
Oh, nice. I love them. Okay. It looks like it's gonna be 2 p.m.
Well, that's when we lose Katie, so.
Okay, so that works out too. So we're having to, I've got to do multiple things. And so it looks like we're gonna stop at 2 p.m. Because I got to go tend to some other things and we lose Katie and so, okay. So yes, everybody on the same one. Draft number 1.2 and Homelessness Vermont, additional recommendations and questions, appeals process. Okay, so we already dealt with this. It's lovely when people have similar recommendations and you can move them. Administering the shelter or housing is also the provider
That's the case
administrative
management
services.
versus-
Yeah. We actually don't address this in here. I mean, that's.
No, and that's, there was
Um,
another one that was talking about, you know, what do we mean by, following housing first principles? And
Mhm.
how is
Where you
that
are.
realized?
How is it realized?
Yeah.
Where are you?
I'm at the, no, we're on the one that looks.
Yeah, I know, I just don't know which paragraph. right?
Poison services.
Food services, yeah. I mean, I think these are all voluntary services. I mean, nobody can force somebody to participate in something in here.
Yours.
I'm just gonna ask Brenda, are you feeling like there's language that feels like it's requiring people to do certain things?
I feel like if it doesn't name that it's voluntary, then the planning process could create situations where it's required and those requirements can be damaging in the end.
Required involvement in services,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, we actually have one word in there that somebody mentioned, which is exactly on point to that.
Go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, obviously, there's a lot of language in here that is delegating, responsibilities, obligations and commitments upon the providers and the organizations that are going to be responsible for managing this. To this point, I believe, and it can be put on in here, for this to be a program, like right now, we've gone from what was more of entitlement, we're in a benefit stage. For this to be a program, we need to establish what those responsibilities, commitments, and obligations are for the participant. So if I'm just gonna go to a layman's term, so hear me out just for a minute. If somebody enters into the data system of coordinated care, this is kind of how I'm envisioning things, so they enter into that system, maybe they call 211, whatever it may be, they get into the system, and then they are possibly referred down to the CAP agency to go through whatever process it is for placement. Within that CAP agency, there should be a case management placement that helps that individual develop a supportive service housing plan. Through their, that's client-centered, they're the ones designated and with their case manager, hey, listen, you know, there are things here that I need to participate in or work with other agencies on. Now, that's that one connection with that care plan, who then has that responsibility. It's a dual responsibility between the provider, the case manager, and the recipient, in which they develop that service housing plan in there, saying, oh, okay, we have this supportive agency. I'm going to use you as an example, and homelessness that provides this opportunity. So we're going to put that down in your housing plan and connect you with that service. The idea is to make sure there is one point of contact that's working with them with their supportive housing plan in unison with those supportive services. If we get some type of language in here in regards to that, we now have a program. And with that, the appeal has more relevance to it, because an appeal shouldn't just be based upon, hey, you're being removed from the shelter. It can now be based upon, because part of that connection is, hey, we got to meet every 2 weeks to go over this service plan that you put together with me, and to make sure we're staying connected. We're working on those relevant services. Then they're able to say, well, wait a minute, you know, we set up this time that you agreed with, you didn't report, didn't communicate. I'm not saying, you know, out the door, but you get where I'm going, to where there's the level of participation with that case manager, helping and supporting the individual to work their way out of the coordinated. That's the ultimate goal, is to get them into that independent support of whatever it looks like. If we're putting everything back upon the provider and saying, hey, you know, you got to do this, you got to do that, and there's no commitments, obligations, and responsibilities on the participant.
So Yeah,
You
you're
get-
hitting, I do, you're hitting at kind of the nub of the whole issue of housing first principles and how they apply or work within an emergency
Mhm.
interim shelter versus, permanent housing, which is where they've generally been used. Because Housing First would say, no, the priority, we get you housing and then we offer you choice of services. And that's what makes it all work. That's why Housing First works. But what that would be saying in terms of the emergency shelter, and sometimes this is, let me just say, sometimes it's hyperbole. It's not meant to say this is the way people behave. But if you had a person who came in and was in emergency shelter, and we're not going to have automatic time limits and so forth. And okay, we need to get you in coordinated. We're going to help you find housing. We're going to follow your choices in the types. And that person says, well, I actually kind of like this hotel room and I don't want to participate in any of that. I want this nice housing, which is what I want. Or, yeah, I'll work on trying to find a Section 8 house. But if it's not, if it's not the type of, or the type of apartment that I want, and you can get into these. So what are the requirements of participation? Do you have any, or are you assuming that if you give choices that are good choices, you don't need to put mandates because they're going to want them versus for whatever reason, people being selective and therefore staying longer, denying access, given capacity issues, denying access to other people who need help because they would prefer something different than the options being offered, or no, I don't want to be meeting with you every 2 weeks.
So,
So, yeah, the question that came to me while you were talking, Eric, is, are there people in Vermont and what happens if someone comes and we have this housing first notion and they don't want housing, but they need or want other services?
They want
What's our commitment
Yeah.
to that? And if they're not willing to enter into that, which is a choice, then does this answer to any of that?
yeah, I mean, I think that we're losing sight a little bit of the fact that there's a whole cadre of service providers out there and other supportive services. There's, a vast array of other things that the community action agencies do, that designated agencies do, that AAAs do, that home health agencies do, that, other housing providers do. I think that the key is remembering that lots of times individuals really have no clue that those things are out there. And so that's the part where the case management and service coordination aspects are so critical, because they may think like, there is no help for me anywhere, and there really could be help for them in some places. And I do understand what you're saying. It's kind of a careful balance, though, between the need for things to be of a person's free will, otherwise they're not going to really benefit from it. But also, if you're entering into a compact, essentially your service plan, that you have responsibilities as an individual. It doesn't mean you're going to always kind of carry them out in the way that somebody else thinks that
But
you
if you
should
don't
carry
want a
them out.
service plan at all,
If you don't want it all,
compact,
then-
you keep your emergency housing. I mean, that's where.
I think you have to engage. I mean, I do think you have to engage.
If you don't, it becomes permanent.
Well,
The
that's,
shelter ends up being a
that's the thing.
permanent environment.
but if there's nothing that says there is any kind of reciprocal responsibility, that becomes part of the question.
Yeah, but like I said, I don't use the word, even in my thing now, I won't use the word rules with individuals I'm working with. Why? Because the rules, you have the same rules that I have that govern society. Please don't assault your neighbor.
Right.
Everything else I look at is an opportunity to participate in a responsibility and obligation and commitment that you're making unto yourself to say, listen, I understand the circumstances that I'm in at this time, but ultimately the goal is to get you into a better position through the supportive unit. And the only way that can be done is there's got to be some active engagement and compliance within that engagement. I have the same level of compliance with the individual to engage as they do. And I've always found that to be an approach of working with, client-centered. They're driving the bus. Why? But if anybody's got a problem, if I have a problem, who's the expert in the problem? I am.
Yeah, oh,
So,
absolutely, absolutely.
is it,
That's what person-centered is.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm just, again, I'll point you back to these things, a lot of like service plans, things like that. I think a lot of this, like, we're getting very into the weeds, and I think a lot of these are things that should be decided and figured out within the, like, the implementation planning. Those are the experts, like, you all have heard testimony, but like, these things are happening. And I've just got to point out this, like, the hotels can, like, be this, like, they can't both be this scary, horrible place that people are afraid to enter, and also this place that people want to stay forever and
Well,
never
they can be, because people are very different. So for some, you know,
For
Yeah,
some people,
I think
they
we're
can be
gonna,
both. as well.
we're gonna be going over and over in circles on this. Again,
I think that
a lot of the things you do, like that case planning, setting goals, working, there are, you know, it talks about like what are the things that qualifies for someone to be, you know, kicked out of a shelter? Like, what are those situations? I don't know how we're gonna ever pass a bill if we're doing that. I really think those are the kind of things where the people who do this work, and like the commission, like, those are the kind of things we should be asking them
And
to figure out.
Yeah.
So I think that, Jubilee, what's happening here is that you obviously have a more in-depth knowledge of the
Yeah.
system than the rest of us sitting around the table. And I appreciate that and value that. I do. And I think it's a good reminder for us to not try to reinvent a wheel that exists already,
agreed.
and to utilize the wheel that's already out there, if it's being successful. Now, I haven't heard anybody other than saying it's long and we need more people to participate in it. I haven't heard anybody say we shouldn't be using coordinated entry or, you know, the COCs and that, because it's, you know, right now, there's federal money that comes into the state and it utilizes that, and it's a significant amount of money. So I think I would encourage all of us to look at what Jubilee sent us, which is the actual assessment. It's very detailed, and from that comes a plan. And so I think that does exist. And I think one of the things that Eric was speaking to, that I agree with, is that when you enter into a plan, and if you're choosing to do that, then you have responsibilities, and it may take, just like in recovery, you know, it may take several attempts to get a person to understand that this really actually could be helpful to you, even if you don't think it is. And but we do have situations where people do not want to engage at all, and that will be their choice. But that doesn't mean they're going to be able to permanently stay in a hotel.
But that's like, that comes back to the question on how are we defining housing first principles? Because in more permanent housing, the concept is your housing is first. You have the housing, and then we're going to offer you services, but you can refuse them all. And as long as you're not evicted by your landlord, you know, you have your housing. You're not required to follow any of them.
Right.
So by using that term as part of what we expect, that can create an implication that you don't have to engage because you're choosing to enter this program. It doesn't mean that you have any kind of engagement.
I would just add that I understand we don't want to be legislating every part of this, but I personally see a difference between us trying to dictate what are elements of a plan, or us dictating what may jeopardize someone's continued participation. I see that differently than us stating an intention, or maybe more strongly, whether someone needs to engage, just generally. And I some of what Eric said resonated with me, that I think we want to have two engaged parties, and hope and think that happens in the vast majority of cases. But that's what this process is meant for. So
There's just levels of trauma.
I get that. I think,
So
I
saying,
No, but it can't be like by day 3, you have to sign a plan type of thing. You do need to work with the person, and some people might be much harder for them to know the resources, realize there are things they want. It might take much longer, but that can't mean that you just have a program that says it doesn't matter whether you engage or not. And there,
I agree.
so there's some sort of balancing where we have to figure out maybe how to
I
word that.
think it's.
And I think that's the
very-
reason why we're hearing all
Yeah.
these different weedy kind of examples is to help us understand where some of those
Right, it's not-
boundaries might be.
We don't want to go into
Yeah,
those
yeah.
weeds, but on the
Not
big
too late for
picture,
that.
Yeah, right.
We don't want to go into them in legislation.
But right, just to understand, so we can weigh.
Yeah, no, I brought this on up because throughout this process, and I'm still working on it, I've been reading a lot of other language throughout other states with their emergency program, and that's something that I have seen. I may not have explained it to the bit, but many of them, pretty much the majority of them, have some connection with case management. That helps with an appeal process, a compliance process, a non-compliance process.
Participation.
Yes,
Participation rather than compliance. Yeah, I mean, I've had experience in supportive housing, specifically family supportive housing. And I think there's a lot of runway for families and individuals who are engaging. So as you mentioned, like when I did this work, if a family didn't show up or, multiple times or had an issue or didn't pay their rent on time or didn't make an appointment, it wasn't like, you're out.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah,
that's the
right.
whole, that's
Yeah.
the essence of supportive housing and case management in my mind.
Working-
That's what we're trying to
working with-
create.
Yeah,
And it's not meant to be like, oh, if you don't check these boxes, we will not help you anymore.
I'm just wanting to make sure people are keeping, like, if you are in have schizophrenia and are in active psychosis, which is happening, you have dementia, just being aware of what we're like trying to define participation. There are so many situations in there. And in the time we have, you are all very smart, wonderful people. But these decisions have very far-reaching consequences, and involve a very acute, highly specialized needs. And so putting that kind of stuff in statute at this point really concerns me. And all I'm asking is that we make that something perhaps like that is discussed in this group.
Implementation, well, or the implementation.
In the
should
implementation.
include What level of participation?
Exactly.
That's all I'm trying to say.
Okay,
I'm not saying
perfect.
statute, I think
I'm there.
that we need to sort of, for instance, I mean, we haven't talked about and maybe, and don't need to, do you a third of your income savings plan?
Yeah.
Sort of the housing.
Teresa's like, oh, God, no.
That all belongs.
Yeah, no, I
That all
agree.
belongs in what they develop.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
there needs to be an indication that when we say housing first, that doesn't mean you can't put any expectations
You
on it.
need to
You can't
be-
develop it. Yeah.
Moving towards a goal at
Yeah.
whatever your pace may be.
I think
I
we
was-
agree.
okay, yeah, okay. So to summarize, I think that really, the concept here is the same concept that we've all agreed upon, which is case management is a critical element and component of this program, and that it is offered to people at really any stage of the program, not at the same intensity, but at
Mhm.
any stage of the program. And that, yes, it results in a service plan, that the individual does have a choice of whether they participate or not. And we utilize existing elements of, processes that already, happen, through coordinated entry. So I think everybody was saying the same thing. I think they were just kind of saying it in different ways and understanding that, we are all moving forward with that. And I think that we do have to be careful about language, because like I did, and notice one thing and pointed it out, which I agree. The use of the word compliance is a kind of a trigger word, I guess, for me. I'll be honest with you. I'm
It's
just
saying
putting
you're
it out
bad.
there.
Yeah.
It feels like, somebody else has set a rule and I have to comply with it. And it's more, if it's not as,
Well,
it goes back to my old job and
Well, my
Trying
old,
to make
my,
people
my,
comply.
yeah, my old job and just knowing I did a presentation last year at the conference around, the rates of people, taking medications that they're prescribed, across a number of different illnesses and so
Yeah.
forth. Diabetes are a problem in a lot of areas for a lot of reasons. But when it's a person for a physical illness, it's called non-adherence. When it's a psychiatric illness, it's called non-compliance. What a world that's saying about
Yeah.
stigma and, you're being bad. The other person forgot.
Right.
Yeah.
You're being bad.
Yeah.
You're not complying. So that's why right away I saw compliance. I'm like, no.
And same to that effect, like there's much to say about individual volition in improving personal situations, but there's also a lot to say about the housing crisis, as a structural problem, which is non-compliance.
Yeah.
As a result of living in a housing crisis, which is, that's not to say there isn't an element of absolutely responsibility, but I think the majority of these people are wanting to escape
Yes.
this awful
Yes.
situation and wanting autonomy. And so a partnership, exactly. I love that word. Partnership is such a good way to.
All I'm looking for is
Yeah.
that, who's that point of contact that's working with, they're working with that point of contact to where the participant isn't, I got a plan over here, I got a plan over here. That's what I'm
Can I ask
looking
you,
for.
Eric, do you feel like the bill is not specific enough around case management or something? I'm,
I think it's more, I like to see where that first point of contact, and that's where they're working together and then referring off. My concern with it not being as specific enough is that a multitude of hands are in the pot,
right.
which can become even more
that's it.
stigmatized and even more difficult because it's like, where am I today to where
Yeah.
people get where I'm going, that's what I'm looking. That's personal, that's my concern about it.
Yeah. And I think that's more in implementation, to be honest.
Didn't know the
I
word.
mean, to making sure that there's not, 5 case managers all doing, purportedly the same, similar things.
Exactly. Hey, this is your point person. This is the first person you're connected with, and then we're referring off and working with all our wonderful providers.
Yeah.
That's where
I think we're all thinking the same way, because my friend, when they started the different kind of case manager for DCF, was upsetting to her. She knew her clients, and all of a sudden she didn't get the people she worked with out. They changed the name of it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it was even hard on her, because she got to know her clients.
of course.
So I think we're all like thinking the same way.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alrighty,
For
so.
both case manager and
And
the.
in the, I'm just moving on. Housing retention support, we've talked about retention, we've talked about ombudsman, we'll consider that idea. That's referring back to the previous thing that we just talked about. Minimum standards, rules and rights.
I think we've been developing that
Along the way.
The list of case management.
Yes.
Services that are expectations of the caps we have in the new draft.
All right, and we'll take the intent language under advisement. When we look at latest version.
Yeah.
I'm at 2203 extreme weather event. Shelter. Environment, accessible places. Transportation.
Yeah, there's just
Just one, again, it's maybe I don't understand thoroughly enough, but the one issue I have about this kind of, especially weather events, shelters, is that could there come a moment, if it's not properly funded or adequately funded, that an extreme event could take care of a budget for an entire region and they would have no more funds to be able to spend. Spent them all on a particular weather event.
Highly unlikely. We're
Okay.
talking about 40, I don't know, like $60 million.
I don't mean for everybody, but I'm talking about a region.
A region.
Yeah, but decisions get made and weighed in different ways.
I think that's why we trust the county, actually.
Right, I mean, we're not gonna make a
Yeah.
decision here at the state level in statute that's going to impact that.
I think regionally, there's expertise to ensure that that does not.
Yeah. And a very extreme weather event, like a tornado or a major flood, you know, we'll be partners, but we're not gonna be the primary people.
Of course.
So, yeah, no, thank you for asking this clarifying questions.
Yeah, and I think likewise, we got other input on all of the unanswered questions about the extreme weather, and that's something that wouldn't be developed in statute, that
Yeah,
they will need to develop.
as part of their planning.
Some of those details.
All right.
And I think, because we're getting to the point where I'm gonna have to leave here in a few moments. I think that the thing to keep in mind as you're reading through these comments, and for the people making the comments, please keep in mind the things that are really appropriate to put in statute and the things that are not appropriate to put in statute. And, you know, for the folks around the outside, you've been around long enough to, you know those things. For people who are just doing this for the first time, you know, we are going to have, as well as lots of other people are going to have worries about a lot of things. We're going to worry. Okay. That's the nature of what we do. That worry, we have to figure out how to, interpret in policy so that it guides the people who are going to do the work and lays out the intent of the legislative body with the resources that we appropriate to get that work done. That's what the purpose of statute is, not to write all the details. Yeah. But people are going to worry about them and they're going to ask questions about them and they're going to put them in comments. And we're not going to be able to address them all in statute is just the bottom line of that. Okay. Alrighty. So we still have more to go through. I'm going to really ask, a lot over this weekend because the weather's supposed to be nice, but I'm really going to ask you to really look at all of the comments, to really carefully read the latest draft. We'll probably have another draft on Tuesday, but to carefully read the latest draft, and to be thinking about those things that are particularly missing. The words on the page that we have now are really good, but I want to be careful that we're not like missing something that we really need to have, okay?
Yeah.
And, you know, I think some of that's been pointed out in some of the comments. So, I appreciate all the work that people have done all week. It's been a bit of a roller coaster and I know it's Friday afternoon, but the week did fly by, even though it feels like it's, you know, been a slog sometimes. So I do appreciate, the participation of people around the room as well, because it's really helpful. And the people who are listening, out there in, YouTube land appreciate the fact that people are paying attention to this. We'll move forward. And I do want to let you know that my goal is to have this out by Thursday of next week. Okay. So, keep that in mind as we perseverate about, you know, individual ideas that we all end up, agreeing on, but we talk about for an hour and a half.
Well, but for newer folks, I mean, that means we have a final draft on Wednesday.
That's a final draft
We
that
have
we
to
will
have
be
a final
voting
draft by
on.
Wednesday because Thursday we may have some final
We have 2 days.
wordsmithing, but
That's
we really
right.
just have.
We have 2 days.
Right, right.
And we don't have all of those 2 days, right?
Because
We don't have
to
all
be on the
those.
floor.
We have to be on the floor. Thank you,
Bye,
Katie.
Katie. Thank you. Bye,
Tuesday
Nolan.
looks pretty light on the floor, so.
And we rescheduled somebody from this week and we are going to ask them for, in our O&A section, just hopefully it'll be a fairly quick update, from the Adult Protective Services folks on the implementation of that statute that we had. So they will be here on, at 1:00 on Tuesday. And then the rest of, we do have the joint judicial retention hearing next week. Don't forget that.
Thursday.
So
That's Thursday, yes.
That's after we voted out.
Thank you for that optimism, man.
Yeah.
There
And
at 7:00 at night.
yeah, yeah, I mean, I really am, we're going to be serious about, having, those are deadlines. Okay, so we will have a final draft on Wednesday to look at, probably Wednesday afternoon, but, we may be here later on Tuesday and potentially
That's what I was gonna say,
Wednesday.
Or come in early.
Or come in early, yeah. So, all right. Thank you all, appreciate it. Have a good weekend. We'll see.